anyone who's missing this, this is going to go up on my YouTube, and also you can rewatch it. You can replay it. So I will send that out tomorrow because tonight I'm going to see the Barbie movie with some friends of mine. So
Oh, you'll love it.
Funny. It is so funny.
oh, good. Thank you.
I wasn't gonna go, and then I went, oh well.
I had two guy friends of mine yesterday. They both said at the same time, I don't think I understood it. And I laughed because that's such a guy answer.
Oh my goodness. My husband and I went, I had tears rolling down my face at the end. Really touched
forward to it. So I
Yeah.
won't be able to upload. It'll be late tonight by the time I get back from work and get home, but I will send a link to this out. Yeah, I'm sure some of you guys will be busy too. So I'll send this out tomorrow morning. And anyone who wants to rewatch it or share it with a friend, you're welcome to. But I want to say hello and thank you and welcome to our monthly Zoom. This is our monthly live workshop for Eat, Paint, Live. I know I have a lot of different workshops. This is the one that happens every month to prepare us for going out into the plein air and painting things out there without having a classroom out there. We want to kind of get those classroom things like techniques and approaches and stuff like that out of the way inside. So when we go outside, we can just apply those and just paint away. So that's what we're here for. And today we are going to be talking about how to capture clouds, specifically in watercolor, although I'm sure that some of these tips will apply to other media as well. So thank you for coming. This is a pay-as-you-wish seminar. I will put the link for the tip jar into the chat in just a little bit. If you're enjoying yourselves, feel free to tip your host. That's me. You don't have to. And the link is also, I believe, in the email I sent out. So thank you guys for coming. So who here finds it easy to paint clouds? Raise your hand. Oh, good. We've got some yes, some confident raises and some so. Yeah. Anyone find it difficult? I did at first. Yeah. I got a couple of people. I found it hard at first to paint clouds because how do you capture that light and fluffiness, but also make them look semi-realistic? But for me, I want to always abstract things. So I'm not striving for photorealism. So how do you do that? And especially when you're out in plein air and you're painting outside and things are constantly moving, how do you capture that sort of ephemeral quality? So that's what we're going to do today. And as always, I've got a PowerPoint so that we can look at some examples and then we'll have a few stopping points where we can paint. So let's see. I also wanted to tell you guys before we're done, I wanted to tell you about a plein air event that's coming up soon. So for those of you guys who are local, there is a really fun plein air event coming up. It's called Sea and Sage. So it's at the Audubon Society at the San Joaquin Wildlife Sanctuary in Irvine. And it's on Saturday, September 23rd. And it is open to the public. And it is to watch, but it is also open to all artists. You don't have to be a part of any club or be a member of the Audubon Society to paint. And the artists will be painting all over the trails. I think it costs $40 if you're not a club member. I'm a part of the Socapapa Club, so it costs, I think, $30 for me. But $40 is still a great price because you can win over $1,000 worth of awards, and you could also sell the painting that you paint that day. So it's going to be a really fun event. Plus you can purchase artwork and you can meet the artists and afterwards, but you get to watch these all these talented artists. You get to watch them painting along the trails. So definitely check it out. It is up on the Socapapa website, or I'll put this information into my next email that I send out as well. I think you guys are all qualified here to participate in this event. Lots of fun. Oh, 100% of the proceeds go to the artist, by the way, 100% if you sell your art. And there's a guaranteed purchase, I think of up to $800. There's a guaranteed purchase by the head of the Irvine Ranch Water Company. He said he was going to buy the winning painting. So quite a big deal.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh, yeah, so I thought I would share that with you guys. So I'm going to share my PowerPoint and we'll talk a little bit about clouds and painting them. Can everyone see this?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, and I think all the paintings in this are my paintings, but if I have another artist pictured here, I will let you know. So we always start by talking about the subject that we're going to paint. Before we paint, we talk about what it is. So let's start off with that. What are clouds anyway? By the way, this is pencil with watercolor on it. It was quite a cloud display that day. So I think we all basically know what clouds are. It's just water that's floating in the sky, right? Suspended in the form of water vapor. So, you know, like watercolors, that because of the quality of water, it's quite unpredictable and a lot of different can show up in a lot of different ways. So there's different kinds of clouds. The clouds are named by the kind of cloud they are, but also the part of the sky that those clouds are in. So clouds can form very low to the ground. They're called fog. They can, when they're right near the ground, they can also form in the middle of the sky. That's, I guess, a scientific thing. That's what they're called, like lower to the ground, middle, and top of the sky. So you can also have, like in this picture, you can have clouds in all parts of the sky at once. And then also you get different shapes of clouds that exist at the same time. So this is up in Independence, where we are heading for our fall retreat in October. And I took this picture because I thought it looked like Indian smoke signals. I thought it was so cool. And I just loved how many different kinds of clouds were in this picture, as well as the sweeping bowl of the landscape. So I've painted this, I think, 3 times, this photo, in plein air and from the photo. Okay, so we name clouds by where they are in the sky. We also name them, so that's all this is showing you: high, middle, and low, and I've kind of painted all of those here. We also name them by their shapes. So cirrus clouds are the highest ones. They always look like feathers, you know. I always think about that Joni Mitchell song, Feather Canyons Everywhere. Generally, cirrus clouds are horizontal or diagonal. So these are our feathery clouds. Why are we talking about this? So that when it comes time to paint them, we can make them look realistic. Not just like what our idea of what a cloud might look like, you know, the symbol of a cloud as a child, right? Cumulus clouds are puffy cotton balls. They reside in the middle of the sky. Cumulus clouds look like a cotton ball, a puff ball. Sometimes they're quite wispy and spread out, and other times they're more clumped together. One thing you'll notice too is the shadows. The clouds seem to have a shadow, usually at the bottom of the cloud formation, and also at the bottom of the sort of different puffball shapes that are within the cloud. So when we're painting them, that will be useful. Oops, sorry, going down one. Okay, stratus clouds are the lowest clouds. So they usually cover the sky kind of in sheets. Sometimes they're puffy and other times they're less defined, but a lot of the time the stratus clouds are the ones that are covering the whole sky. Look at this beautiful photo. This is up in Ojai, by the way. You could see a lot of different colors in these clouds too. And what's interesting is we often think of clouds as being white, but here you can see a whole range of colors where the clouds are white, but they also have pinks and yellows and violets in them. And then you can see where the clouds are darker than the sky. Not just the highlights in the clouds or the shadows in the cloud, the shading, but the actual bulk of the cloud is darker than the sky. Can you guys all see that?
Mm-hmm.
Both in the lower ones and also in
Yes.
the upper ones. Yeah, so just again, something to think about is you don't always have to reserve your whites. We'll talk more about that later. Okay, then you just have fog. We talked a little bit about mist and fog when we covered skies, colorful skies, last month. But again, we'll come to it again. So fog can obscure the things you're looking at, but it also can be an entity unto itself that you can paint when it's quite heavy. Okay, so now let's talk about the shapes of the clouds. So nimbus is another word that you'll find associated with clouds. So adding the word nimbus means just that there's precipitation falling from that cloud. Okay, we don't see a lot of cumulonimbus clouds here in Southern California, but we did last weekend when things are raining. Cumulonimbus are thunderheads. So Sarah, you recently took a trip into the Midwest. Did you see a lot of clouds? Because you sent me some clouds.
I saw tons of clouds.
See any cumulonimbus? Were you thinking about clouds a lot while you were there?
I was thinking all the time about clouds. You had just put out what
Yeah,
what we were going to do today. So
I figured that because you were
yes.
sending me beautiful photos. I think I used one in here that we can paint with. So I'll show you guys some more examples of clouds, and we'll talk about how do you make them, because that's really what we want to talk about. How do you make these clouds? So blotting is a common technique to create a soft edged cloud. So you basically would lay down a background. It could be wet in wet, or it could be wet on dry paper. And then you use tissues to blot out the paint before it's dry. And it'll pick it up. So we'll do this together in just a bit, but you will pick it up, and then you can blot over and over again until it's as white as you want, until it's the shape that you want. So who here has used this technique to create clouds?
I have.
I have.
I have.
Great.
I have.
Yeah, that's awesome. Almost all of us. Good. It's an easy way to create a soft cloud. You, as you can see here, you could leave them or you can shade them afterwards. But like here, they're just left pure white because there's so much going on already in the painting that I didn't want it to be, you know, a high contrast with what was going on with the foreground and the middle ground. I just wanted a little bit of interest in the sky, and perhaps you want some interest in your sky, or perhaps you're trying to accurately capture a moment. So there's a lot of different reasons for the choices that we make when we're painting in watercolor, right? It could be we need a little highlight there, or it could be that was a cloudy day and it was the day I got married, and that's the day I really wanted to picture it accurately, you know, different reasons. So and also you might just want a tiny little bit of it, so you can keep them pure white like they are here and here. Again, you know, it conveys a sort of serenity, but there's also, it's not so flat and dull when you've got a little bit of white and it's picking up the white or whites in the foreground as well. You can also darken the bottom of them or darken areas in the middle of them to either contour them or just add some more visual variety. So here, what I've done is add some gray. I was using gray in this picture. This is just a snippet of a picture. It's not the whole thing. And there's also, there's also like just a mark that I made here by accident. That's right there in the picture, but try to ignore that because I really do love the rest of this picture. So I just leave it alone. And, but you can see I've added some touches of gray to contour these clouds a little bit. So the first pro tip of today is to keep a lot of clean tissues on hand. You can bunch them together or twist them, as I did in this case, to create natural shapes with no hard lines. So has anyone ever twisted their tissue to kind of drag it along and create more of a horizontal or a diagonal cloud? So you're just going to twist it like this, and you get a different shape than if you just bunched it up on this end and blotted. Okay, pro tip. So here's the full picture. Again, there was so much going on in the foreground and middle ground that I just needed there was a lot of verticals and diagonals too. So I just needed some horizontals in the sky. And I believe that's actually what it looked like. I don't think I have the picture with me, a photo, but I did take a photo of this.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Why did you leave the wires in there, the telephone wires?
I here, can you see also the pole is there?
Yeah.
I think I
Yeah, I
just
can see.
wanted some more signs of civilization in there.
Okay.
So sometimes rather than putting an actual person in, you can put in you know, a signpost or wires or something like that. I know it's an odd choice for a landscape picture. I just wanted I wanted to show where it was. And
I got you.
yeah, it was on the edge of the golf court. And it worked, I guess, because somebody came up to me when I was up in Bishop and said, I know exactly where that is. I live across the street from there.
Oh, really?
So that was
That's
cool.
great.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
also it broke up the picture. So the picture itself didn't have a clear focal point at all.
Right. I see what you mean.
So I felt just sometimes I don't really know why until somebody asks me and then I think about it. So thanks for asking. But
You're
yeah,
welcome.
it needed something. It just needed something. So
Diagonal, it needed the diagonal for the
Yeah.
composition.
it did. It needed, but I didn't want a super strong diagonal. It just
No,
yeah. I
just
thought
kind of brings your eye back in when you get to the right-hand side, you kind of, oh yeah, go back to the middle.
yeah, for such a classical composition, I mean, there's a lot going on with the mountains in the foreground, but there wasn't enough, you're right, there wasn't enough to necessarily keep my eye moving and being drawn into the picture. So it did serve that purpose. So that's great. Yeah, so
Thank
Pam
you.
said- you're welcome. Pam says, is that a paper towel or a Kleenex? Good question. So it is a Kleenex. Paper towels are okay too, but some of them have a lot of texture. And so you're going to end up getting texture in your blotting. So I prefer the softness of a Kleenex. Good question.
Good question.
Yeah. So here's a picture with some clouds that I thought we could try the blotting technique. How do you guys feel about that? Want to
Sure.
give it a shot? Okay. So if you'd like, you could take a little screenshot of this. Or
I
you,
don't know how to do that.
well, do you have a phone with you?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for your tips coming through, everybody. I really appreciate it. Yeah, so you can just sort of take a picture of it with your phone. And then you could have something to refer to. And I'll go back and forth, but I'll show my screen to show you guys how I would do the blotting. So I'm going to, just while we're talking and I leave that up on the screen, I'm just going to take some tape and I'm going to just divide my my Arches paper in two. Don't really have to use Arches for practice, but using a less expensive paper like Canson is great too. But I had the Arches out, so I'm going to use it. And we're not going to do a full painting, but what you could do is you could use this, if you prep it as a full painting, you could use it as the start of a painting, and then you could always finish the landscape afterwards if you are compelled to do that. For some of us, it's hard to start a painting and then not finish it. Like, oh, it's right there. Let me just finish it. So I'll stop the share and then I'll put my camera on. So I've just got this prepped like I'm going to be doing 2 mini paintings. Don't have to use tape either, really. It's not necessary. Okay. So I'm just going to move things a little bit. Is that a good visual for everyone?
Yes.
Now it is. Yes. Thank you.
Moving the camera a little bit. Okay, great. So let's just draw very simple. Here we go. So if I were doing this for real, here's where my picture is going to be. It's not a very interesting picture. Well, it'll have to be something a little bit more interesting, but I'm not going to draw the clouds in this case because I want them to be soft and I don't want that pencil line. So I'm just going to take note of where they are in the sky. And I like how they're kind of floating along the sky. It kind of looks a little bit fanciful. It is difficult to get teeny clouds like that in watercolor with a wet on wet technique. But I'm going to wet the whole sky. So you can wet the whole sky, and then another way to do it is to leave crispy dry white. But for this one, this blotting exercise, I'm going to wet the whole sky. Next month, we're going to do mountains. So maybe I'll finish this painting with you next month. I'm just going to mix up some, I think a little bit of cobalt blue for this sky. It's definitely not fully cobalt. I might have to add a bit of phthalo blue to it. Phthalo blue makes a nice vivid sky. By the way, I also use when I'm doing skies, I use 2 different glasses of water. One of them is clean to wet the paper, and then the other gets colorized as I dip my brush in. Do you know why it's useful to have clean water to do wet and wet? Like extremely clean water? Anyone?
I don't.
So have you ever painted a wet on wet background with dirty water and you end up getting sort of a crispy, weird bleed? That can happen where you kind of get a bleed, and that's just because there's a tiny bit of pigment in your paper. So that's why I like to use clean water, and then that won't happen. Okay, so I'm just going to crumple up this tissue before things dry and try to pull some cloud shape out of it. So the longer you let it sit there, the more color you'll pick up and the whiter your clouds will be. You just have to keep bunching up the tissue in a new place so it's always clean, because otherwise you're going to end up just redepositing that blue paint right back into the sky where you're trying to pull it out. And the water that's in the paper is sort of working for you and against you, right? Because it's in the middle of the paper now. That water has already sunk in a bit. So you really do have to do it, I would say, multiple times if you want a bright white cloud. And it's already time for a new tissue. You don't have to do the clouds exactly as you see them. If you end up where you like the composition better, you like the shape of the cloud better, or perhaps you like the edges that the cloud created better, then you can stop. So I'm sticking my finger through to make these little clouds. Just kind of getting that shape. And sometimes you may want to go off the page like I did here. That looks realistic when things go off the page. So there's a little filament of something there. I'll just try to pick it up. So I never really was a cloud painter. There are some people that like specialize in painting clouds. A lot of Midwestern or Southwestern painters, they're really good at it. And I mean, their paintings are almost all sky, and they really have fantastic cloud displays, and it's be quite spectacular. I'm gonna just, now things are drying, so I'm just gonna try to pick up a couple of little shapes in there. There we go. You can see I made the mistake of sort of dragging my tissue a little bit too much, and I got little bits of tissue in there. So don't do that. Don't do that. Just try to push down and lift up. And still there's more blue coming up, but I think it's pretty good right now. Here we go. So I'll stop it here. Doesn't look like much, but it is the start of something. Because there's so many clouds here, I like it, but I think that it's not so stylized. The way that the cloud shapes look kind of real and so forth. So I would love to tint them a little bit and kind of give, oh, sorry. Oh, look at that bead hanging out there. This is a great example. When you lift your paper up or you tilt it the wrong way, you can get a bead running in there. So do you see, because I had it lifted, how it's going to create a dark, crispy edge right there that I don't want. So I'm going to lift up the bead over here with a thirsty brush and just get rid of it. That just happened because I was showing it to you guys, but this happens really all the time in your painting, the need to lift the bead up. So it's good practice. And then I can turn it over again and make sure it looks good. When you have that little crispy line there, it can often look like a mistake, or it can look fake.
Yeah.
It can be quite distracting, right? You guys know what I mean?
I do.
And it's best to pick it up while it's still wet. Did have a little bleed in here too. So I can use my tissue in the same way as I made clouds to get rid of that. Okay. So also by holding it up, I got a couple little run-ins or run-backs up in the clouds, but if you don't lift yours up, you won't get that. So anyone who's real pleased with how theirs came out, want to share? Or anyone who struggled, wants some help?
Oh.
Vicky, I'm coming to you, Vicky.
Let's see, how do you do
But you have to
that?
hold it right in front of your face when you've got your background blurred. What?
How's that?
No, we just see ghost hands. Can you turn up your background? Are you able
Yeah,
to?
let me try to figure out how to do that.
Okay, I'll come back to you then. So I'll come to a couple other
Okay.
people first. Nice, Sarah. That's
Thanks.
really good. Yeah, you got a lot of bright white there. That's excellent. Now, do you like the look of them just pure white, or do you think you would also add some different values to them and give them?
I put some shade and that they
Oh, you
weren't
did?
all complete,
Yeah.
but I when I do the mountains, I can make a little bit more dark that might go on the bottom, because sometimes they're dark on the bottom. But this is, you know, a book, and it's not the best paper, but gives me the idea. Thanks, Anne.
You're welcome. Pam, I'm going to come to you. And then I'll come back to you, Vicky, because I see that.
Yeah, no problem.
Let's see. Pam.
Okay, so the problem I'm having is I'm painting outside, and I think I did do wet on wet, but I think it dried before I could pick it up.
It dried
Oh,
too
your
fast.
clouds are so gentle. They're nice. I like them.
Yeah.
So what's the trick?
So the trick is, I will show you. When you're outside, especially to keep the paper wet, you use a mister. So it's just a little water in a misting bottle, and you want it to be kind of a fine spray. So you can just mist it and do it from high up. This way you don't get droplets in there. So if you do it real close like that, you see how their droplets appear. But if you do it kind of from high up, then you can keep things wet, and you can also sort of concentrate them a little bit more closely. So either real far away or like real close up right in there. And then you just blot again. So now it looks like rain is falling from my clouds because I wanted to show you the wrong way to go about it. But that's how you would create rain, one of the ways. Pretty, right? So you just use a mister with a very fine mist. And I basically just use like one of those travel hairspray bottles that I made sure to clean thoroughly and get all remnants of hairspray out. Yeah, so give that a try. A lot of plein air painters, they use those misters regularly to keep things wet, especially on a hot day. So a hot, warm day it's very necessary. So good question. Vicky, we'll come to you, and then I see Joyce's hand up too. Ooh, pretty. Very nice. So you got a little tissue in yours too, huh?
That is actually from where I erased my lines when I was doing my drawing, and it didn't,
Oh,
I had
okay.
already, the paper was too wet. It didn't
Yeah,
erase
sure.
right.
But you see why it's useful to not draw the lines in for the clouds. Sometimes
Yes.
it's no big deal if you've got some line, but if you're going for a real soft and you don't want the distraction of the line, then you have to just note where you want your clouds and just remember, and not worry so much about the shape being perfect. Oh, that's nice, Joyce.
Thank you.
Beautiful. So soft and
Again.
pretty. Yeah.
Right, they're kind of soft. I think another thing that would make them pop more is if the background blue were darker.
Yeah, that's great. And you can do that, but I would wait until it dries.
Mhm.
So if you're in the damp stage, the best thing to do is wait. And then what you can do is you can just do it over again. You can glaze with water and then add more blue where you want it. You don't even have to put it everywhere, but if you want it to spread a little bit, wetting it will help. And that by that way, you can darken the background a little bit. You can also obviously do it when it's dry, and you can just do it without wetting the paper, and you can blend.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, sometimes the skies just, they come out too light, especially when you're doing wet on wet. What can happen is you cannot mix it up a shade darker because you have to take into account that the wetness of the paper is going to dilute your watercolor that you put on top of it. So if you make a tea-like mixture and then you add it to the water that's already on the paper, it waters it down even further. And I forget about that myself a lot of the time. Okay, Jerry. Yeah, you get caught up in the moment and you're just like, that looks good. And then you do it and you're like, oh, it's not dark enough.
I think mine's too light, and I can't see the clouds very well. I'm waiting for it to dry, then I'll put another coat of blue on it.
Mm-hmm. It's subtle. Yeah, it's pretty. It depends how dark you want the background to be, right?
Yeah.
You could also brighten up the clouds more by using that same technique where you wet the paper again, and then you pull more of the color out of the white of the cloud. So that can happen where you want to pull more out, and the water, when you wet it with clean water, it will reactivate what's in the paper a little bit. It depends what blue you use. Some blues are more staining than others, but if you don't use the super staining blue, you can lift more out of it. And you can do that over and over again if you want to get it brighter. So I see Louise has her hand up. Hi, Louise.
I don't know if the light here is so contrasted.
That's pretty. Wow. Yeah, that's
Can
beautiful.
you see it?
Yep, we can. Very nice. Good job, you
I
guys.
like the technique. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone
I
else?
like the effect.
Joyce, you have your hand up. Is it still up? Oh, Hillary, sorry. Let's see. Go ahead and lower your hand if you.
So what I did was, instead of a thirsty brush to get rid of the line, I used a wet brush. I don't know.
That's nice though.
That's nice.
No, they're very subtle clouds. So it's kind of, I did it twice.
That's really nice. I like the effect by doing it twice.
I tried doing this, like you said, and I don't know. This is what I ended up with.
It's pretty. It looks like you have some weather going on there. It looks like
Yeah.
you've got some rain coming out of one of the clouds.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
But you're
On
right about
your-
that.
on
I don't know
your
why when I
left.
think thirsty brush, it's supposed to be a wet brush. I have to remember, no, that means a dry brush. Thirsty means it wants. to
Thirsty
touch.
is dry with just, it's like the tiniest bit of dampness in it.
Okay.
Thank you
Have to
for
remember
sharing.
that.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
So let's add some touches of shading. So here's the picture again. So see where our shading happens? Like, don't lose the white. The white is so beautiful. So if you don't want to lose the white, you have to be careful of having white around the edges, and not just the top edges, but also sometimes a little bit in the bottom edges. But here's where you can also add more shape to your clouds. So let's go ahead and I will share my visualizer. So I usually mix up like an indigo or some violet perhaps. Depends what colors you want in there. I think I'll put a little violet with my indigo. And I'll just do it now, even though it's not 100% dry, because I don't mind. But here's where you can use the tip of a different brush. So not your fluffiest brush maybe, but you can create some texture and mold those clouds really. But still leave white at the top, in the middle, and even on the bottom. So that's a nice, I would say, fairly subtle way. I'm using just a real thin wash. Don't have to do it on every single cloud. That's a nice subtle way of just adding a little bit of form to these clouds. And then if you wanted, while it's still wet or when it's dry, you can touch even just a little bit more color in to the bottoms and give it a little bit more watercolor magic, but also add a third value in there into the cloud. So they're starting to become storm clouds, so I don't want to go any darker than that. And you could see I got a few bleeds because it's still wet. It's not 100% dry. So if you don't want those bleeds, you wait until it's dry or grab the hairdryer. You know how it goes. Now, remember when we did our colorful skies, we talked about having sun peek out from behind clouds and knowing where your sun was in the sky. Well, here's another time where you could think about that. So for example, Vicky, in your background, you've got the pretty background of beautiful sort of peaches and yellows and all sorts of colors. But where is the sun? So for example, in this picture, if my sun is hiding behind this cloud, this is the cloud that's going to get the most color treatment in it, because this is where the rays of the sun are behind this cloud. So you may have a little bit touching into some of the other clouds, but where you'll see the most is behind this cloud. So it's important to remember if you are putting, and obviously there wasn't one in the picture, so this is just fanciful, but if you're putting it in, you want to make sure that you have the most vibrancy over here. That's where my little sun would be hiding behind.
What color are you using?
I used yellow with a touch of cad red light mixed in. Quite often we do get these sort of pink and purple and yellow cloud displays, especially at sunset and sunrise. I'll just put it everywhere now. And if you add a little bit more red, you'll start to get more vibrant skies. So we're kind of just tying together the two lessons, last month's lesson and this month's lesson. Okay. Chances are with that rain I did, you wouldn't see that kind of a sun in the sky. But this is just for practice. Anybody especially happy with their shading? If you'd like to share, you can hold it up. See everybody's heads down, still painting. So I'll give everybody another minute and I'll share this screen again.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer.
You mentioned something about red. I missed the beginning part of your sentence about the sun. So you mixed the yellow and red to.
I did.
Okay.
I did. Yep. Good question. So over here, I put yellow in, but I also wanted to take some of the brightness out of the yellow. So I mixed a little bit of red into it. And then I used varying degrees of those two mixes. So there's some yellow, there's some orange, there's some peachy yellow, and there's no bright pure red. But it's just those sort of soft variations that create that glow. Yeah. Good question.
Okay. All right.
And
Thank you.
Course, you're welcome. Of course, that's not what we're seeing, right? That's not what we're seeing in this picture, but that's okay. I just wanted to showcase the rest of the technique. In this picture, it's really just purpley bluish gray shadows, and without the sun is most likely overhead directly. Okay. Sarah, I see you, so I'm coming to you. Oh, that's wow, you finished.
I'm not
Sarah.
finished, I'm working.
That's gorgeous. Yeah, just a little touch, a little subtle glow. That's beautiful.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
Anybody have any questions? We got good questions and comments today. It's fun to paint clouds, isn't it? It's really zen-like. You can just dab away and it's so relaxing. No one's ever going to say to you, that is not the way that cloud looked. I was there. So there's less pressure. And you can just kind of go with the flow.
Using my my notebook to travel with is probably what I would do in plein air, and I can now see why it would be more of the sketch to come home to, because I've really grown to be in love with the arches, and I'm not going to use that when I'm practicing, but using this little booklet, and I forget who made it, but it's not telling me.
It's that
anything.
American water, that blue one that I have. Yeah, it's great paper, but you're right. It's, first of all, it's not as good as the arches. It is cotton though, in that sketchbook, because I also think if you're painting small, I mean, if you have a sketchbook, it's great, because you know, most watercolors, they can't get a really big full sheet or half sheet out on the trail with them. It's just not possible. So yeah, some watercolorists they do that, and others use their sketches purely just to make studies and capture the light notes, the color, you know, and for the joy of being outside and painting it rather than taking a photograph, right? But yeah, absolutely. Then you come back in the studio, you can use your bigger paper, your better paper. And you were going to say something else, Sarah. Did I steal?
When I was going over the blue, I used water to soothe it a little bit, and it got little lint sort of. So that's why I think arches would make it easier, because this is not quite arches.
Yeah, that's a good point. So the Arches paper is cotton, like that notebook that you have, but it's long fiber cotton. It's got really long fibers, so they don't break down so easily when you are either scrubbing or lifting. So you can actually work at things a lot more on Arches paper than you can on most of the other papers. And that's why. But
It could have been the remnant of my tissue.
Yeah, it could have been some tissue. I actually, it's funny, Sarah, I have, this is an aside, but I have that same watercolor notebook as you do. And I didn't love it at first because I was going real easy with the color and the water. And then one day I just said, oh, screw it, because I don't like this anyway. So I'm just going to throw everything at it and see, just make a mess and just be free. And it actually worked better. So that paper can hold quite a lot of water and pigment. And I actually think that the paintings look better when you use a ton of pigment and water on that particular paper. Isn't that funny? I feel like when I go kind of soft and pastel in that paper, it doesn't look great. But when I go really thick and vibrant, it does work really well. I haven't quite figured out why yet. Yeah.
Like this a couple of sessions ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
It held the thick, heavy water.
Yeah, it really
paint.
did. Yeah, I love that picture. I remember that one.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
When we went to the wetlands. So
yeah. So the lesson learned there is that try different things with your papers, by the way. Because you never know what's gonna surprise you. All right. So shall we move
So how's
on?
everybody else doing?
Or do you guys want to share, or should we move on?
Yeah.
I have a lot of hard lines in
I
mine.
don't know, it's really boring, I think, but
Okay,
I try to-
I'll spotlight you, Hillary, and then I'll spotlight Vicky. So
I'm trying to add some.
yeah. Keep
Does it
going.
look like
Yes. I mean, sometimes when that happens, you just have to do more of it and make it look more purposeful.
So what do I do with that? What'd you say?
I would say rather than going for soft edges in this one, try to just keep going with the harder edges, because that's what happened when you painted over it. And so just go with it. Yeah. With the harder edges, it'll just have more energy in the sky. So it could just be a different version of that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Just got to make the most of it. Vicky, sorry, you started to say something.
I lost the whites.
You lost them a little. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. You just have to kind of, with watercolor, you either have to preserve the white for real with a masking fluid or tape or something, or you have to just always remember to not paint those areas. Yep, more practice, or
Loaded.
yeah, or if you're if it happens to you over and over again, which it used to happen to me working wet on wet, especially with Viviva, because they have so much spread, they move so much, then what you can do is make the shape bigger than you need it to start, knowing that you're going to have a little bit more of that creep, I call it.
Oh, that's a good idea. Thank you.
Yeah, really interesting.
You're welcome. Let's do some more, shall we?
Let's do some more.
Thank you for sharing, everyone. Okay, so we talked about blotting, but you can also use a brush to make your clouds, especially those cirrus and stratus clouds. So for example, here in this picture, you can see two kinds of clouds, maybe three. And I've used a fan brush, but you can also twist your tissue up like we talked about before, and just rather than blot, sort of drag the color. And so a thirsty brush with a fan brush works really nicely for that kind of thing. What I'll tell you with this picture is this was not a wet on wet background. This was a dry background. So I basically just painted around the white shapes and then dragged a brush into the blue. And then when things were dry, I went back in and added a little peach inside those clouds. So this is from the Cotswolds. Look at all these.
Oh,
So
yeah.
beautiful, huh? So it's a pretty easy technique, but something you might not think of. So keep it in mind next time you see these kind of feather canyon clouds everywhere, that you've got a couple different ways of creating them. Okay, so here's another pro tip. When you're doing your skies wet and wet, rather than wet the whole paper, you can actually leave slivers and shapes of the white clouds and avoid wetting those areas. And then when you paint around them, rather than just paint a flat wash, you sort of paint around them. And what you'll get is you'll get some crisp shapes, but you'll also get some bleeds. Do you guys like the way that looks?
I do.
Yes.
Color blue was that?
Oh,
Oh, wow, that's
That's
pretty.
This blue here,
fun.
Jerry, this is Viviva. This is their
Oh, the
peacock
Viva-
blue, I believe.
So you
Okay.
you wet around where you wanted the clouds and then added in.
I left some dry shapes on the paper. I left dry cloud shapes. So rather than wet
Okay.
the whole page, it's very hard to show that one on screen, but rather than wet the whole page, I left some sort of cloud shapes and didn't wet those. And then when I painted them, I avoided them to a degree, but because the paper is still very wet, it kind of creeped in. So
Did
we
you
can
use a more dry brush? You just wet the paint and then use a more dry brush on the.
what do you mean by using a dry brush? Oh, you mean
then
for this-
added the color.
the
You
darker
didn't add
areas?
more.
For
Yeah.
those darker bits? Yeah, those darker bits I just dropped in with yes, with a less wet mixture to get these like right here. Is this what you're talking about, these areas?
Yeah, so you did that after, you're saying.
After, right, correct.
Okay.
But when wetting the paper, I left this shape. I
Mhm.
left this shape. And I just dragged and left. This is just the texture of the paper sort of showing through. And probably there was one here. So then I would wet everything but these shapes. And then when you lay the paint down, you just remember where those dry shapes are and you avoid them. So we'll do that in just a little bit. We can practice that. That's an easy one. I'll show you a couple more examples though. So I did the same thing here, is I avoided this shape here and I avoided this.
So pretty.
And then this one I probably blotted. Or I avoided and then added a glaze to it, I think actually is what I did. I think I actually glazed over this later. So, and let me see if I have any more examples here. Yeah, I did the same thing here. So
You got a UFO up there.
yeah, I was trying to do that. Thank you. Right here. Here's my UFO.
No, I'm thinking that up there.
The big
Well,
cloud.
maybe there's more than one, but there's definitely. Yeah, actually, this was signage in the sky that didn't come
Yeah, that looks like a UFO I've been seeing on the news.
out. Thank you. So it's important, and I'll show you, it's important to keep a white tissue on hand because the paint will start to seep in there and you can lose the whites super easily. Okay, so let's give it a try, shall we? So we're not going to use a reference. We're just going to paint from our imagination. And I'll use the bottom here. So I guess I'll just make another landscape. A real simple one. And I will wet the paper with clean water and just leave some shapes for clouds. Remember to leave the shapes bigger than you would actually need them because that creep happens. So it's very hard to see, but I'm leaving 2 shapes, maybe 3. And if I tilt it sort of to the side, I can see by the sheen. me see if I can get a little more. There we go. You can see by the sheen that I missed a spot right here. Okay, so another thing you can do, Pam, when you're painting outside is wet it more than you need to. Because even before you can get your paint on there, it's gonna start drying. So do like
Okay.
two passes. You don't really want standing puddles per se, unless you're going for that look. But you do want the first pass will seep down into the paper. And the second pass will float more on top. Okay, so now I know where I've left those shapes, so I'm sort of just painting around them. If you change at the last minute, you decide you want more shapes, just paint around things, just kind of negative painting and leaving more clouds. But what you'll see is here, where I've left the dry paper is much whiter, and here where I painted and just painted around the wet paper, you really are getting a lot more creep. Okay. So these look pretty good on their own. I'm going to mostly leave them alone, although this is a weird shape and I'm going to fix it a little. There we go. But that looks a little weird too, like an anvil. So it is starting to creep a little bit, and you can just pick it up if you don't want it. And then you can twist and lift it up here. So sort of like we did before, it's just you give yourself a little bit more of a white as a starting point. Now I'm going to use a dry brush to get some of those feathery clouds out, but I don't have a fan brush right now, so I'm just going to spread the bristles out.
What are you doing with your brush, Anne?
I'm making it into a fan brush just by holding the bristles straight out like that.
And you're just lifting?
Yeah, you just don't get a hard line. Yeah, I'm just lifting.
Okay.
Yeah, subtle. Okay, so then Hillary, you asked about, did I just add more dark color? If you want to do that, then now's the time, right? So you make a thicker mixture up, and that's where you can put, I did it a different color just to make it a little more obvious, but that's where you can add the variety into the sky. You do it now while it's still damp, but you do it with a thicker mixture. By doing it with a thicker mixture, you avoid blossoms. And here's how you can also make a little more definition in the clouds. Some of you guys said mine didn't show up dark enough. The sky wasn't dark enough. Here's where you can sort of fix that. Just have to know your paper and what stage you can do that in. If it's too wet, it won't work. And if it's too far along in the drying stage, that won't work either. It's a little flat down there. It's funny looking. So I'm just going to fuss with it just a little bit there. Still way too much blue left in my brush. Sometimes it's a good idea just to take a clean brush. There we go. So I wet that edge because it was looking a little bit too hard, but I can also pick up some of that color. So a couple different techniques all at once. I can hear everybody painting and your water glasses clinking.
And our brains thinking.
I can hear the whirring, yeah, the whirring sounds. Woo. So this top sky is definitely more tranquil. You've got a more mellow sky and more drama in the bottom. So it is all about the effects. You got so many different tools. It's about what you want to convey. Sometimes I'll be trying to convey tranquility and it will end up too energetic and vice versa. And in that case, I just go with it. And I can always paint another one and try to get it right. But I always keep going with these sky paintings because generally I could just change the mood on my own. And a lot of artists do that. We paint multiple versions until, first of all, until we get it right, or second of all, just to capture different moods of the same exact subject. Anybody feel like sharing? Sarah, you're so fast. Oh, nice, Sarah.
That's beautiful, Sarah.
Yeah, that's really,
Thank you.
it almost looks like a face.
I've been thinking about clouds.
Yeah. You've been, I think a lot about stuff before I paint. It does, it's funny, people always ask me, how long did it take you to paint that? And I'm like, do you want me to include the time I spent thinking about it or just the actual painting time? So I've been thinking about some things for hours and others for years, how to approach it. Joyce. Oh, thank you, Joyce. I'll spot you for everybody. Oh, wow, Joyce.
Oh, nice, dramatic.
Really beautiful.
I liked your sky color. That really makes a difference.
Yeah, that's an indigo, right?
Well, it's black mixed with the cobalt, I think.
Yep, there you go. I love it. I really love the darkness at the bottom. It's very dramatic.
Well, I got too much paint around the white and a hard line. So what I did was I just took a wet brush and brushed it up into the white, but left a lot of the dark in the bottom.
That's nice. It turned out great.
Thank you.
Remember that. So sometimes we do stuff just as a fix and then you're like, wait, that worked. It worked really well. So you have to remember it for next time. So that softening technique is very useful. I did it too, but mine's on a much softer scale, I would say. But I softened the edge of this hard shape here and it bled up a little bit and I like it. All right, everyone's painting away. You guys want a little more time or should I go on?
A little
Fine.
more time.
Okay, thank you.
Whole thing, huh? Oh. Top of it.
So it's been too warm really for me to go out and paint. So I've been getting a lot done in the studio, which is fun. And I do go back to my notebooks or sometimes I do studies on loose paper and I'll go back to those and then I'll do the larger painting in the studio from the plein air stuff I've done, whether it's in a notebook or I just don't show you guys that stuff that often, but I probably should show you more often that I do. Because a lot of the time when I do demos, I'll do a demo of a big work and it will be like a start to finish. And that'll be sort of the finished work. But quite often when I'm on my own, I'm just doing studies. I'm not necessarily setting out to do a full painting. You know, I get warm really easily. I get tired easily. I'm kind of a wimp when it comes to plein air. So in certain ways, so a lot of the time, like for me, a half an hour to an hour can be enough. And then when I come back into the studio, I've got an inspiration to work from. I've got color notes, compositional studies, you know, and even if I'm not thinking about it like that, like a formal study, it is a sketch. It's a sketchier version of what I want to then flesh out usually in a bigger size. You know who's really great lately with watercolor skies, and he just keeps getting better and better. So, and he always puts clouds in his pictures, even if there's no clouds in the scene, because I've painted in the same scene as him. I've been painting like, you know, in the same place, and he puts clouds in his pictures. And that is Jeff Allen, Geoff Allen. I'll put him in the chat. You can check out his work. He's great on Instagram. He talks a lot about how he paints and why he did, how he changed the scene in front of him, how he adapted it to make a better composition, or better colors, or added clouds, you know, that kind of thing. So he's really a rising star with watercolor plein air. You should check him out if you haven't already. All right, so it's 11:15. So Vicky, yeah, we could take a minute or two and share, and then we'll go on. Beautiful. Oh, it's still wet. I can see the sheen on it. That came out really nice, Vicky.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Very pretty. Anybody else want to share with us?
Yeah.
The sharing aspect. Okay, Jerry, it's so great to see everybody's work. Oh, that's nice. Look at that.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Thank you.
so much more dramatic than the top one. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Top
It's-
one's more like,
It just seems more confident.
takes a little more work. I
But
got it. I
already
think
from the
that's
first one to the second one, it feels more confident.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Want to
Hillary had one. Where's Hillary's?
It's a mess. I don't know.
Are you holding it for us? Okay.
There.
I can hold it.
Oh, that's nice.
That's
Pretty.
nice.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay. I
pretty.
tried to make them more white, like bigger and whiter this time.
Yeah. Again, you have to leave more of the paper than you think, because
Okay.
you always end up encroaching. Because you can always, you know, make it smaller. It's much harder to make it bigger. But
Okay.
that's a nice start. Yeah. Thanks, Hillary. All right, I'm going to move on just because of look at the time. Let's see. Okay, so in the last month's seminar, we taught a workshop. We talked about creating mist, different ways to create mist. So for those of you who maybe missed it or want a refresher, you can go back to that on the YouTube channel. Painting Colorful Skies is the name of it. But I use mostly wet and wet techniques, and I use my little sprayer to help me create mist. I also soften a lot. I soften the edges of things with a damp brush, and sometimes a very wet brush. So that's what's happening here. But to create this kind of mist is just doing a wet and wet sky and leaving the white of the paper. So rather than paint the whole paper, I paint from the top down and stopped about halfway, and then let osmosis take it the rest. So see that soft bleed that you get, those are really run-ins. But what you get is the effect of a gradated sky and also mist, a mist in the sky. Do you guys like that?
I do.
How did you do that again? You
So
just,
what I do is, so I'll wet the paper, the whole sky, and then when I paint,
okay.
I'll paint the blue to here. Let me
Great.
spotlight myself.
Thank you.
Let me hit the spot. So I'll wet the paper and I'll paint the sky, but rather than painting, say, 2 strokes and going all the way to the horizon, I'll only paint 1 stroke, and then
Okay.
tilt my paper vertically, not 90 degrees, but maybe like 30 or 45 degrees, and let the osmosis take it down. It will
Okay.
go down. And then when it's where you want it, I level the paper off again. So I'll tilt it till the bleed gets to where I want it, and then I'll stop it. So going like that will stop it. You can also then take a tissue And you can also stop it even more by going like this and just sort of drying it. That's how I do it. It's very
And
effective.
that's just with water. That's with water and no color.
I wet the paper, but then I add the
Okay.
color.
Then you add the color.
It's
Okay.
like doing a flat wash, basically. But
Okay.
rather than painting all the way down to the horizon, I stop above the horizon and tilt the paper and then let it flow a little.
Okay.
And it's a relatively simple technique, but it takes practice to get it right. Here's where I did it again, and you can really see I had to blot here. You could see that the purple was creeping too much because the paper is not white anymore. The paper is like a lavender, and that's because I had to blot it with a tissue. You guys like that effect?
Yeah,
Yeah, I like that a lot.
I like it. Yeah.
So
And-
that that's the lavender that creeped down to the mountain.
Yeah. Yep.
Wow. It's like it pulled out the grayish part of the.
Exactly. It really ties it together. And then the other thing, you can see this little sparkle here in the sky. This just comes from dragging your brush kind of quickly. When you've got a textured paper and you want to create a nice even flat wash, like up here on the top, you go quite slowly. And that way the paint deposits into all the nooks and crannies. But when you want to go quickly, when you want to leave a little white sparkle, you go more quickly with the brush. You drag it. And that's how you get that little bit of sparkle. Because what happens is the brush, when you move it quickly, the brush will deposit the paint on the hills of the paper, but it won't have so much time to flow down into the valleys of the paper. Believe it or not.
You added that tree on the left after. It looks really
cool. Yeah, the tree was at the last move.
Really pretty.
Thank you. So we've also talked about how you can employ blossoms to create like a glow, but you can also use blossoms to create clouds. I've got a few examples of it. So you can see in the one I did before, you guys see the blossoms here. There's definitely some blossoming happening, and I hope I put one. Yeah, here's a close-up of that Catalina one where you could see the feathery edges of the blossoms. So I use this technique all the time for clouds. And to create a blossom, you just have to use clear water on a damp surface with paint on it already. Okay, so you paint your clouds, you paint your sky blue, and then not when it's super wet, when it's drying and it's in a damp stage, you take clear water and you just drop it where you want it and it will spread. If you try to employ that on a very wet page, it just will spread everywhere. It won't, it's too wet. So you have to do it when it's on its way to dry, when it's in that damp stage. Damp is always the best time to create blossoms. Here's another super easy way to create clouds, is just use negative painting. So just don't paint the clouds, paint around them. And then you can go back and you can fill in color like I did here. So I basically just avoided the shapes and painted the sky. And then when it was dry, I went back and I put those golden yellows in of the clouds. So I think everybody here by now is used to creating negative shapes. We do a lot of negative painting in watercolor. So you're basically just going to avoid them, but then they might look too white. So you have to then fill them in with different colors or shade them in after the fact. So here's another one. It's really obvious because I think I drew it in pencil, but where I've only painted that indigo sky on the top and the bottom, and I left that whole white shape in the middle, and then I just went back with a very light wash inside it. So this is the easiest and fastest way to create clouds. And if you're out in plain air and you don't have time for things to dry, or they're drying too quickly, don't fight it. Just use it on a dry paper. Paint around the shapes. Here's another one. This one's super obvious. I've got the pencil lines are really visible. Painted the blue, then went back in when it was dry and added 2 colors, right? So 2 values of gray. So first I just painted everything but this shape here. Then when it was dry, I painted a light gray. And then when that was dry, I painted a darker gray. And I did some degree of that on all of the clouds, and you really get a feeling of them like hanging sort of low and puffy, heavy over the water, which is what I wanted to do. You get a lot more control over the shapes. Now, let's say you like that idea, but you don't like the crisp edges. Well, you can just you can blend them out. So you can make them look maybe a lot more natural, or you could have a combination of where you have soft edges and crisp edges, and you could just blend those shapes into each other if you want it to be, say, more photorealistic. You don't have to leave the hard edges. I just wanted to in that painting. But then you'll see like here on the left where I did blend it, excuse me, like right there. It's a much softer transition. So you just paint around the clouds, and then you can contour them and color them after the fact. The one on the right, there's several different things happening. Including some, I'll show you in a bigger picture, I think. So painting clouds on top of the sky is also another option, right? Like we kind of showed in that mountain picture in the beginning. You can use a darker pigment, or you can use the same pigment and just glaze it again to paint your clouds on top of the sky. In this case, I painted in a negative sense, but you can paint them in a positive sense as well. So take a look at this painting. What I did was I did pick up some of my color with a tissue on some of these, but then I added a glazed pink cloud right over it. And then here, there was no white behind. I just used a darker color to create these darker clouds in the sky. Is this something you guys think about when you think about clouds, or do you sort of always start with the white and kind of go from there? Question for the group.
Now you think about how to make the color, like when you see in the clouds, when it's, you know, how it, so this is really good. I guess it's kind of,
you have to see it, right? You have to like get used to not just the construct that clouds are white, because clouds aren't always white. They're reflected colors, and they've got a lot of different colors in them. And maybe there's even smog in the sky, and then they get really bright. And again, at sunrise and sunset, you get a lot more colorful displays with the rays of light that are being refracted through the clouds. But I guess that's the place to start would be, right, Hillary, with first of all, just reteaching yourself that clouds aren't always white.
right.
And knowing that you can create those with darker colors, especially let's say you just forget and then you want to add it in after. There's nothing stopping you.
Mm-hmm.
So here I used a combination of leaving white spaces in the paper, just leaving negative space, and then also painting over with some of these darker colors. So here, and all of these, this sort of, I don't know what you call this, silvery gray shade. And you still have the effect of there being white in the sky, because you can leave white if you want to. So let's see more. Here's where I've just painted over with darker colors, or just different colors. Using dry brush in the middle, by the way.
That's so
create that kind of stormy look. Yeah, so also skies can have more than one kind of cloud at once. And it's important, I think, just to remember that it's not just that you're trying to capture the look of the sky, but also the mood. So the mood can be tranquil, it could be more energetic and dramatic, it could be stormy. It just depends. Here, the use of clouds on the diagonal brings your eye into the painting, whereas there was, I mean, half of this painting is sky, and it would have been very static without having those. But I also wanted to mirror the shapes of the birds. Do you guys remember painting this one with me? This is like from one of the first classes I ever taught.
I still have that painting we did. That was a fun one.
That
That's
was
beautiful.
Way back when, but it was a good one. Yeah.
Where is that,
Yeah.
Crystal? Where is that?
It's Fan Shell Beach up by Torrey Pines.
Oh, okay. It's very pretty.
That was a fun one.
Nice composition.
Yeah. Oh, the other thing too is that don't let reality hold you back. So you can have skies be pure white, your clouds can be green, vice versa. Your viewer can decide which here is the cloud and which is the sky. So you're the artist and it's your vision that matters. It's up to you to figure out how you want to balance your painting and what you want to express. This is me painting at night, by the way, and trying to leave some clouds at night. And I thought, here's a painting that we could play with using darks. We can go over a little bit if everybody has time. But we could try to maybe capture that using a dry paper. So using the negative painting, and then I'm going to take a picture of it. So using the negative painting, but also layering darker colors on top, because there's quite a lot of darks in this one. Do you guys want to give this a try? Do you guys have time?
Do you have time?
I thought you had to go to work.
I do. I have some time. I have about 10 minutes. Let's do it.
10 minutes. I think I'll watch.
I love it. 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
Just 10
You're
minutes.
so funny.
It's real quick. It's all one color. We don't even have to go crazy with colors. So I just need to put more tape on my paper. I would say, yeah, maybe use like an ultramarine blue, or if you want, or you can use the cobalt. There's some nuances of color in here, but we can do this in monochrome.
What colors do you feel are the best for like, or any blue? It just depends on your mood.
I often, because I'm painting like in Southern California a lot, I like to use phthalo blue for the sky, because I feel like a lot of the time we have that really bright sky.
Okay.
I just love the sky that it gives me, you know. I just really like it. So I'm going to put my camera back on. Here we go. Let's paint this one. Let's do it.
What size are you making it?
I'm just using half of my 9x12. So it's 6x9. But remember, and I'm going to use indigo, and I'll use pretty much just the indigo. And I'm just going to focus on the sky, right? And I'm not going to focus on the ocean or anything right now. But by avoiding some of the whites, and by the way, you can always add another blue. Like there is quite a cerulean. So let's say if you really wanted that duality in the sky, you could just touch in some cerulean there. I don't love cerulean blue because I find it so waxy. So it's not my favorite. I'm keeping my layers thin, because when you got 10 minutes and you want to paint on top of something, you really do have to keep your layers quite thin and not have a lot of puddles or anything, because it'll take too long to dry. Again, very useful when you're outside, because sometimes you really do only have 10 minutes whether it's, you know, the people you're with and they're like, we don't want to paint all day, come on, you know. Or it might be that the storm is about to come in, like it is in this picture. So see how I just dragged the brush across real quickly? And that's how you get that sparkle there. You can see it right there. So I went more slowly on top, and then I did it twice actually. And then I just went real quick right there. I'm actually going to paint the island in here too. This is Catalina. With a storm coming over it. So now I'm just going to paint over the whites. Some darker colors here. Now remember, if you have too much encroachment in your colors, just use your tissue. You can lift up a little bit of that white. Are you guys painting nice and loose? Do you feel like even though it's
Nice and fast.
nice and fast for sure, yes. Don't have a lot of time. Fast is good. So normally I would let this dry, or not normally, but maybe sometimes I would let this dry. But when you're painting really fast, you don't have a lot of time to let it dry. Just dropping in the color to get that drama. And again, remember when you drop in with a thicker paint. And then you don't run that risk of having bleeds. If you want to create a bleed, go for it. I think there could be some real beautiful ones. Yeah, I'll put one in here. One or two.
What's this here? brown. This brown. No, that's purple.
Purple would be pretty, I think, in this picture here. I think that'd be really nice. This picture is interesting in that you can actually see the precipitation starting to come through up at the top. I don't know if everyone can see that. That's another class, how to paint precipitation. But see, that was just 10 minutes. And it's a nice study. It's not finished. But I feel like for me, this would be enough to have these as notes and then come home and get out of the storm and come home and make a painting in the studio. I'm gonna take the tape off. That blue is so bright. It's making everything else look dull. Did anyone paint nearly as fast as I did today? I feel like I've got 3 paintings now to finish, and I'm going to do that and send them out to everyone. So I hope you guys will do that too. So I want to say thank you for coming. And I hope you learned a little bit, a few new techniques. Maybe look at clouds a different way. I'm cleaning up all my blue on my palette right now.
Thank you, Anne.
You're welcome. Would anyone like to share?
I don't know. I guess if somebody has to, after all the trouble you
Somebody
went
has
through.
to. Thank you for taking the fall for us. Oh, that's
Look at
pretty.
that.
Oh, nice.
It's
You're
dripping.
very
so-
wet. It's dripping.
It's dripping.
Yeah, you're dripping. Blot that up. Sarah, I'll come to you. Oh,
After
Sarah.
all the time you took, we have to. Look at Sarah's. Hers look beautiful.
Oh, that's so pretty. I feel like I'm there. Nice, Sarah. God, Sarah, you're so fast.
Very nice.
Beautiful. I can't wait to see all your vacation photos that you paint now. Beautiful, Sarah.
Thanks so much, Anne.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne.
You're welcome.
Have a good day, Anne.
Oh,
Don't work too
thank you,
hard.
Terry. Yeah. Oh, I gotta go. I've got to go to work.
Thanks for this, Anne.
You're welcome. Thank you all. You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Thank you guys so much. Have a great day. I'll see you next month.
You
when we do
too.
mountains.
Thanks. Looking forward to it.
Thanks.
Bye.